experience of the void.
There's definitely a thread between you. Like, that's unarguable.
Are you in Perth?
Sydney.
Oh, you're in Sydney.
Are they Sennheiser headphones?
Yeah, 650s, HD 650. I've been using them for years, man. I love them.
Same, I think the same.
I think you've got a more recent version because they look more aerodynamic. You'll be able to go faster.
I can hear faster.
It's important to move quickly. Well, the internet.
To hear, yeah.
The internet. This is the void. We have Devin Townsend. We have Plini. We were just having a discussion about what this removal of stimuli has done to a creative mind. And Devin was talking about a fairly profound realization. I'll let you retell it. It feels wrong of me to like put it into your thing. So yeah.
Not even a realization so much as I think a lot of us tend to sort of romanticize our strengths and maybe how centered or how balanced we are. And then when you're stuck in a situation where that's actually put to the test, I realize just how much work remains to be done. And that's been actually really inspiring in a sense, because it makes me look at my output. Like, I've been writing like maniacally, and it's all with that realization makes it so much that I'm like, oh, I don't want to write that. No, I'm not into that at all. That's like, or this direction. It's like my reason for doing that is because that's what's expected of me, or this is, you know, the identity that I've created for myself publicly. I've got a certain amount invested in that, and in order to adhere to that. And when I'm stuck in this, this environment, I find that I'm just like, yeah, well, in absence of having to give a shit about what other people think about me, I realize that I've got no interest in that right now. And it's resulted in a type of music that has been surprising to me, actually.
What's the most surprising element? Like what, because you just mentioned you've got a big project that's underway that this would be a part of. What's the caper?
I'm sorry?
What's the caper? What's going on? What is it? Yeah. Because you've been in a joy mode for a while, like empath, and, and I think you both share that. You've had a lot of joy in a lot of what you've put out in the last few years, both of you. And I think it's been a salve, I think, because the world does feel darker, and maybe it's just, it was always dark. We just aren't as distracted anymore. But yeah.
It's a choice though, I think. And I think maybe that's the thing that I've recognized personally. I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but it's like, I do feel that when I start to spiral, or when things appear to be perpetually dark, I find myself recognizing that I'm making a choice to allow that to be a part of my trip. And that's been a really interesting realization. And even in the ways that that's presented itself, it's made me recognize how much of my past has been allowing myself to make that decision subconsciously, right? Like, because yes, it is a dark period in a lot of ways, but fundamentally things aren't, in my opinion. So remembering that has been, it's been great to have that put to the test. You can tell by the lightness in my room here.
I feel like between us, we have the full gamut of, like, I have artificial nature, we have full clean white, and we have darkness. I feel like between the three of us, we have expressed the full extent of artificial inside experience. Like, this is, I think Kubrick would be proud of us.
I wouldn't. I am on the other side of the planet though, and it is winter here.
Yeah,
so it's like,
and here it's like it's summer. It's
it is
tropical.
Misery out there. It is. It gets dark at like 3:30 in the afternoon, and it's just like, it is. It's nasty. But
I wish we could show you how tropical it is right now, because I feel bad.
I see behind you.
I feel bad about COVID. I feel bad about the weather. Yeah. What do you think, Plini? What's your experience of all this? There weren't small questions. Yeah.
I'm in the afterlife, in case you haven't noticed.
You're in the afterlife. Yeah. So you're in the. So yeah. So what?
How's the food? How's the food there?
It's terrible.
Oh, shit.
Man, I thought after we died, it'd be good. That's not fair.
Me too.
Oh, this is an outrage.
That's the scam, guys. You need to enjoy this life.
Oh, really?
It's like bread here, just bread.
Well, that's okay. We'll get through
sourdough. If it's
Yeah.
sourdough, I'll still consider it a win.
It won't be
Yeah.
sourdough till my generation's the one that's dead, and hipster
That's gonna be a
bakeries
while.
are.
Oh, we
Hipster
probably got
bakery.
we probably got 3 generations as well. Like we've got everything covered here. Like we're not going anywhere. Yeah. What has been your experience? Do you feel like, like joy being a choice? I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I think a lot of the darkness I've had in my life, I was definitely unconsciously choosing. I think and I think a lot of people, I used to I read something once that said some of us cultivate misery like a long fingernail, like a fingernail to play guitar or something like. So it's it's an interesting, it's an interesting choice, but it is true. What do you think? What do you think of this sort of emotional space? Yeah.
Well, I think I've wanted to cultivate that fingernail, and especially my sound guy has always said, dude, you need to get your heart broken. All your sad moments are the best, and you write too much happy music. But I haven't, that hasn't been the case yet. And it's like the last album I started at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was like, oh, it'll just be another month and then everything's fine. So I haven't really looked into the void until now. And now it's kind of like, well, what do I want to do now if I don't know when I'm going to play music that's live or things like that? And so I don't know, I think it's opened me up to just write sort of anything that comes to mind. I'm not sure if that's a similar thing to what you were talking about, Devin. Like the music you're writing now is more are you thinking about what you do before you do it more than usual?
No, I think that's been the underpinning of the creative process for as long as I can remember now. In fact, that's the thing that typically has been off-putting between me and musicians that I work with, is they're always expecting me to have a vision that is more specific than it is. Whereas I'm just kind of like, I'm going to go in that direction because I think at the end of that is a compulsion that I feel. But what it actually is, like what it manifests as, I'll have no idea until a week before it's mastered, and I'll be like, oh, okay, it's about dinosaurs or something. But I think that amidst the existential ruminations, the other thing that's kind of come to light during this period for me is the fact that I have been so controlling over my environment and my world for so long, again, sort of unconsciously, that when you're thrust into a situation where there is literally nothing you can do, here we are, it's a week from Christmas, but we can't get together with our family. We can't get together with our parents. We can't leave the house. It's like there's a part that makes you want to just react with either anger or sadness. But beyond that, I think is like a real need to just surrender to it and just be like, it literally is this. And in there is a lot of positivity, actually. And I think that has been reflected in the music because without getting too far into it, because it's so pretentious, it makes my head hurt. This project that we're working on now is it's really about following it where it leads, and then if it changes course during the process, it's allowing that to be part of it, and that's resulted in things that it's not standard. It's not like this is your verse, this is your chorus, this is your it's this abstract form that clearly has a trajectory, but the only way that it's going to be actualized in a way that's going to be accurate is to just not think about it, I guess. And that's been really helpful, I think, on a personal level, to not be so convinced that initial spark of inspiration is something that needs to be followed, to the chagrin of everybody around you and everything. It's like just wherever it goes, I guess we just have to follow it. And it's going to some really fucked up places. It's great.
Like a dark place?
Well, I mean,
that's so black and white. That's such a black and white question.
Well, I mean, I'd love to explain it to you, but I also, again, it's like I hate to feel like I'm monopolizing the conversation. So maybe we just go into circles.
Okay, go in circles. Yeah.
What about you, Plini? What are you working on now? Okay. Are you on another?
Yeah.
Well, I'm writing the first song I've ever written with the intention of having someone sing on it, and it's very confusing because what I immediately do is write songs that sound like songs that other people write for singers. And then that's like all the time that I've spent writing guitar music, I've been trying to figure out what I can do that's slightly different or interesting. And so now I'm starting at like, I have no idea what I'm doing and trying to figure out how to write an interesting song that someone will sing on.
What's its vibe?
That's metal. It's like it's just 16th kicks for 3 minutes.
So you guys, I don't want to be the one to facilitate it here, but Devin, if you've got some time, I'd like to
sure.
do sting on it. I'm
Yeah,
just
of course.
saying, like, I don't want to, like, help a baby.
The thing is,
sorry, this wasn't my intention, and this isn't my.
No. Since I first heard Plini's music, I really resonated with the clarity of it. I really enjoy overt, fundamental optimism, and I'm not saying that as an insult in any sense. It's just that a lot of times people tend to deny the fact that there's good things about this reality, right? It's a shame you're in the afterlife now, because that kind of puts that whole thing to the test. But I keep being asked to sing on metal, and I have it as a component in what I do, because I think as a dynamic for certain depths of emotion, it's untouchable. But I'm just removed from it in a way now, specifically after this year. I've got friends that are in bands. They're like, man, we've written the most brutal thing we've ever written. I'm like, how? What the fuck would you want to listen to that shit for right now? It's like, my friend sending me this thing. It's like, dude, I finally finished my record. It's just like brutal, just brutal death metal. And I'm thinking, where are you getting that right now? Is it like, because I can't summon the energy to feel that way at this point, right? But yeah, no, send it to me, man. I'd love to hear it. Okay, I'd love to tell you about this record I'm working on.
Yeah, go on. Go on, get in there.
Plini, can I tell you, or are you gonna?
You can tell me.
All right.
I'll tell you if it sucks, I'll tell you.
Okay. So what happened was I got hired by the BBC to do music for infants. So there's a 15-part show for kids 4 years and under, in which they use music to describe color. And they had heard some quiet music that I'd done in the past and asked me to do ambient music. So some of it's like, what music would describe pink or gray or brown or green or red or whatever. And so I've been listening to ambient music more than any other type of music for the majority of my life, I would think. But I think it's been one of these things that, because it acts more like a watercolor in a room, it's been this sort of abstraction that I tend to sort of keep to myself, because I think, well, who wants to fucking listen to this shit? It's like humming noises, right? But then by doing this project, I realized that was the one style of music that I really felt connected to during this period. So I started making hour-long ambient jams. And then in the same way that you're maybe cloud watching, where you'll see something and a cloud, eventually something appears in it, like a face, or if you're listening a fan, the repetition of the fan, you might hear a voice or a melody or something. So I just kept listening to these sort of structures that I was making with echoes and reverbs. And then I started recognizing patterns in them, or melodies or rhythmic components. And so I started sending them to friends of mine. I said, there's a pattern in here. Can you extrapolate that and send it back to me? And then I started collecting around 15 or 20 people. And I said, okay, well, in this is the information that I want to make sound intentional. So as opposed to it being ambient music, it's like orchestrated. And so this one became very abstract. It's like this really abstract form that the more I started listening to it, the more I started recognizing that there was a narrative that I kept thinking. So I started making markers in my session that would say, okay, this is like Miami Vice, or this is like Blade Runner, or what have you. And then that narrative started to want to have a description of some sort. So I asked an artist friend of mine, I said, can you make essentially jams that I can make like a movie with, that I can play while I'm listening to this thing? And then as I started doing that, I started thinking, well, these things that he's made, if I zoom in on them, they look like environments. And so I had this animator in the UK. I said, can you take these abstract things and animate stickmen throughout them, and have each one of these forms represent like a continent. And then that started to snowball into, well, each one of these characters can represent a part of the subconscious. So like the red ones could be anger or what have you, in light with what we were doing with the ambient project. And then the metaphor at the end was that all these places end up coming together into this fourth dimensional sort of globe that represents essentially the awareness of others is the piece missing from the puzzle. So I started thinking, okay, well, we should call this the puzzle. And then I started making another piece of music with the express intention of it being completely beautiful, like as beautiful as it could be. So, you know, flautists and harp players and choirs and I thought, well, we should call this one Snuggles as like the opposite side of it. And then between the two, the puzzle and Snuggles, it became this metaphor for, in a sense, like the emotional side of the brain and the rational side of the brain. And then together they function with the overarching story being it's about making a decision. It's like the process that people make in order. So I gotta show you this. Check this out. So
it's the greatest, by the way.
So are you? Can you? And so is Plini. Can you let me share my screen with you here? You gotta see this.
I would like to know how to do that.
It's an interesting. I'm really psyched on it. And so now I've got the orchestra from Seattle and the women's choir, and then there's like 25 different participants. It's 2 records. It's become 2 records, 2 films, a graphic novel, and an actual novel. And it's nothing to do with songs. It's just these weird fucking abstract chunks of sound that are highly decorated. So when you listen to ambient music, you're like, oh, it sounds like somewhere in there is a violin. Well, it's actually now it's like the symphony doing that. And it's like, and you know what? It's what happens when you're up your own ass for 9 months. But ultimately, it's the only thing that I was doing, because I wrote several dozen songs for an album, but I just couldn't be bothered with any of it. It just, none of it seemed to fit this current reality, but this chaotic abstract sort of metaphor really did. And so yeah, I really like it. I think it's really good. And we're going to mix it in Atmos, which is this really interesting sort of 3-dimensional space that you can have. So yeah, I'm boring myself now. But that's it.
No. Maybe we should have locked you. Maybe we should have locked you away in a cave a while ago. If this is what's bubbling under the surface, like.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think the thing that also has been coming to the surface more than anything else recently is just the addictive mechanism of work too. It's like, it's so easy to sort of offshore these anxieties into some sort of addiction, right? Whether or not it's booze or drugs or food or sex or work or anything. And I realize now that my tendency to work as much as I do is just another avoidance, right? So we'll see. It's really cool though. It's going to confuse a lot of people.
Isn't that the point?
What's that?
While you've been doing this, I've written a 3-minute song with double kicks. So
send it to me. Send it to me.
Well, I've written no music, so really, I think everyone here is winning. Everyone is winning on the thing, but I like.
I'm in the cave though here, guys.
But I like okay, so I like how complex that is as a concept, because I feel like we don't get to use our whole brains to digest that much information that much. Like, that's quite a dense amount of information. And the thing that stuck out was what you're talking about, those stick men, like representing our awareness of each other. The consciousness of each other is the thing that's missing. Can you elaborate?
I just think that it's also the thing that has happened from being in an environment where I don't have to participate with people in the same sort of bullshit way that I have spent the past 30 some odd years doing. Is it makes me a lot less hesitant to just say what I feel.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a real benefit from that, because I think a lot of times you end up dumbing yourself down or withholding certain things just because you don't want people to you know, be like, oh, that guy's full of shit, or that guy's pretentious or whatever. But, you know, maybe you are full of shit, maybe you are pretentious. And so I like being able to explore that.
Maybe we're all full of shit, and there isn't a more fundamental human thing than being like, we're all, how else are we gonna survive? We have to kind of tell ourselves something. Like we all are a bit full of shit. We're all, and you know, I think like talking about like dealing with other people and stuff, I feel like so much we're just butting up against other people's insecurities and trying not to trigger them. I feel like that's what life is. Like you're just trying not to like trigger some dark part of other people that they're going to hate you because you remind them of something in themselves that they hate. That's how I feel like I deal with the world. That whole don't take anything personally thing is real, man, because it's never about you. It's just never about, I don't know, like
unless they're within striking range.
Then it's thing. But I think by and large, like,
oh shit. I mean,
according to
sorry,
you're living in the future.
No, this little talking spy box that tells me what the weather is, the Alexa thing.
Well, what about joy? Can we talk about joy? I think, because I think that, and that was one of the things I have written some stuff, and I'm like, I do think that is something that I think is a real gift to the world. And it's funny that I found both of you through heavy music, which is inherently dark. And I think there is something inherently joyful. And I listened to that live album you just put out, and you're like, for the next few hours, we're on a vacation. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what everyone needs right now. Like do you have to be joyful to make joyful music? What do you think,
Plini?
What do you think, Plini? Like,
I'm so joyful. I have so little like negative experience in my entire life to this point.
You're
I have
so young.
Nothing. I know, but like even then, like I grew up in a nice place and I have a nice family and I haven't really been through much. And then now when people piss me off, I find it funny. So it's like a very little genuine darkness to draw on.
I wish you with every ounce of my being that you can hold on to that, my friend.
Me too. That's so awesome. Do you know how rarely I meet someone like that?
Yep. And you can sense it in your music too. And I think that's actually really, I think that's really important for people. But I think that to hold on to that takes effort. Like clearly, man, I'm sure it's been tested. I can't imagine that you've not been through moments where somebody has tried to enforce that negativity on you, especially in this industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably why I've avoided working with people in any capacity where they sort of have a power over me.
This is the real reason why everything's a solo project. You're protecting the
white
lie.
I mean,
I think that's awesome.
I think I get to like talking to someone that could become a manager or something like that, and they'll have an idea for something that's totally like meaningless in the scheme of things. Like, what if we could put out your CD and the cover could use this font? And then as soon as I get a bit of like, I don't like that font, I'm like, bye, I'm not working with you. I need to do it myself. This is going to bring darkness into my life. I don't want you.
I think that the only thing that I would say for darkness is the juxtaposition between. I saw a thing the other day which I thought was really interesting about a long distance swimmer who he swam for, it was 4 hours unassisted across the channel, and then it took him 8 hours immediately to swim back, which is ridiculous amounts of physical strength, right? Like it's just ridiculous. And he said that the juxtaposition between the pain that he felt whilst swimming and the relief that he felt once he was in a position where he no longer had to do that was where he found the most value, in a sense. And I think that in no way do I relish darkness, but knowing that I've had moments in my life and still bear that within my identity, that tendency towards at least the recognition of it, has provided some really interesting creative moments where there's that precipice, right, between those horrible things and then solving it, or going through an addiction or going through some sort of traumatic thing, and then it goes away or it resolves, right? And I think that there's a real singular beauty with that moment that is not unattainable, but I think that for me as a human being, it's something that I can rationalize the darkness with, right?
The space between it, the space between it.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting.
It's playing with fire though, because I think that and this is what we were talking, Christina, before Plini joined us. I think that one of the things that I recognize with this time on my own has been my tendency to follow the devil, and by that I mean where it's such a fearful environment, just in general, being a human being, and all the things that are constantly sort of bombarding us in terms of social media or negativity of others, and with that, through our entire life, we find these patterns that are self-destructive, yet they become these things that we are so familiar with that in absence of it, like, it's like, okay, shed that. You don't need this addiction. You don't need this negativity. You don't need this negative self-talk or whatever. And you shed it. And then all of a sudden you're just like, well, now what do I do? Like, now there's 10 more hours in the day that I don't know what to do with. So it's like, I'm going to engage in it in some, covert way, and then write some stupid song about how, I learned my lesson, and, it's all this shit, right?
We're such ritualistic animals that even the most painful ritual we seek to repeat. Like, it's just that dopamine rush, like that neural pathway sort of thing. I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt. I was wondering if it's the dopamine or the pattern that we're more, because we're such pattern-seeking creatures too, right? Like, we're looking for anything that can give us a sense that it's not just abstract chaos, that even if the pattern is self-destructive, there's a certain comfort that comes from, at least I know that. It's like being in an abusive relationship and saying, they'll change or what have you, right? Because it's familiar, and we endlessly seek at the same time familiarity and novelty in this sort of strange what are they called? Circles. In these circular circles. That's the word I was looking for. Where they're like, we're both kind of seeking them, and I don't know what the answer is. I wonder if we collectively as a group are getting more hardwired into this darkness or less.
I think it's a choice.
Yeah.
What do you think, Plini? Do you have any idea?
I think it's necessary to, like, my romantic vision of all artists is basically they're born on the street and have a horrible life and then do something beautiful and then die. And then the thing that they did is great. That's like how I see, like, all great artists for some reason. And then,
may I ask you a question then?
You may.
What do you think the function of art is?
For the artist or for the
for the artist? For the artist.
Probably to work through whatever it is that is their life in some way, but also maybe because you can't think of any other way but to do it. Like, I can't, if someone asks me about making music, there's like a small part of me that just doesn't know anything other than I want to make music. It wasn't like I decided, I'd like to make music. How do I do it? It's like, I need to make music for some reason. I'm going to try and figure out how to get better at it at least, or I'm going to hate my whole life.
Well, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. It's like a way to articulate joy or pain or what have you. And it's socially acceptable too, much more so than, just constantly throwing yourself on the ground and kicking yourself in a circle, screaming about how unfair things are, right? It's like,
it's
more constructive.
It's not illegal to just scream in the street, I don't think.
I mean, it's frowned upon, but a lot of things, like, it's frowned upon. Like, you could probably get away with it. Like, I think all three of us could probably get away with it for a certain amount of time. Like there'd be
You
a certain
figure?
amount of time. There'd be a level where it, you know, it must be nice sharing music. I want to do insane things like sit down and go through 18 hours of conversation and make it into 3 minutes. That's a weird compulsion. It's not even as fun. People don't even get to, you know, it must be nice sharing music with each other.
What do you take from that then? What do you?
I'm meant to do that.
Maybe that's the answer then, right?
Yeah, like I'm meant to do it, and I've only just gotten started. Do you feel like you're at the beginning or halfway point? Do you feel like you're at the starting line, or how far into the race do you feel like you are, you two?
Pure beginning for me.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I think about it.
Maybe it's a bad thing to think about.
I don't know if it's a bad thing. I just think it's like, I mean, I can't imagine you guys don't feel the same way, but I think I'm dumb as shit. And it's just like,
I think you are too.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, as you go, man, it's like, but with that also comes well, you're not.
No, you're like, yeah, dog, seriously. Like,
but Plini, are you dumb? Are you brilliant?
I know nothing.
But okay, well, who's smart? Is anyone smart?
Dogs, maybe. I've met people who can articulate themselves. I can't argue. Like, I'm terrible at arguing. Because all it takes is somebody to present me an opposing point of view, and I'll be like, oh, I never thought of that. And then I'm like stuck.
That's really good that you can do that. Don't ever get
terrible.
Yeah. What do you think the internet gave us, guys?
Anxiety.
Yeah.
What is your experience of being Australian right now? Like, what does this experience change your experience of who we are as a country? I don't know how relevant this is, but
yeah, mostly just guilt.
It's mainly guilt.
I have a lot of.
I feel really bad.
Guilt, like professional guilt, because I just released an album and people like it and everything's going my way, and it's sort of most other musicians that is not their current experience of the last few months. So I just try to avoid talking to anyone.
So good.
Well, since I've known you, you've had this the same point of view. Like, since our first conversation, I remember you saying things that were very similar. Like, you know, I feel guilty about the fact that my life is as good as it is, and that I feel as positive as I do. And
you were saying, and you were making an interesting point, and I think just to frame it up, what was your first impression of each other? Because you guys, I would imagine, have known each other for a little while, having existed in a sphere that.
Well, it was last year at the.
Yeah, that was we spent time hanging out in my hotel room, and then sending homoerotic images to each other, from what I recall.
Yeah.
I remember, I remember thinking, oh, I can talk to this guy. This is easy. There's no, I don't feel like I have to play games, which I'm fortunate to have a bunch of really, really great people in my life. And that seems to be the criteria for the most part, right? Because I talk a lot. And it's like, but with you, I remember thinking, oh, I really like this guy. And I really like the clarity that I sense, and it's calm. And I just, you know, I think you make great music. I think you're a fantastic guitar player, and I really enjoy your company. So that's how I felt.
Oh,
yeah.
I remember you looked like you do on the internet.
Really?
I came from being a fan, so I was like, oh, it's that guy. And you were unloading guitars from a car when I arrived. And I was like, oh, do I offer to help? Do I pretend that I'm like on his level and he should like carry my shit? Or like,
I would have. You know what's interesting? I was thinking about this morning as well. Is it's like, how old are you? I actually don't know.
28.
Okay, yeah. So I got 20 years on you. That's awesome. I just remember being a kid, and when I first met somebody who I'd seen in a magazine, it was so surreal, because I remember thinking, like, I don't participate in that. That's not my reality. I go to high school, and I was in a local band, and all I wanted to do was play music. And then when I finally met somebody whom I'd grown up with, who's significantly more famous than I am, clearly. It was so weird because I thought, well, this doesn't exist. And then as I started being in this career for as long as I have, and then over the years, it's like all of a sudden there's generations of people that maybe that grew up listening to what I did, or people who are just like, oh, you know, my mother used to play this song for me when I was an infant. And I'm thinking, shit, that was like the 12th record that we did, you know what I mean? But it's just interesting to see how it keeps going. And Plini, with you, it's like the next generation of people will feel the exact same way about you as you had with that experience with me. It's just part of it. And it's not easy for either side unless you get unless you have a real need for that sort of recognition, right? In fact, that's always been the thing about the career that I found most troubling is the recognition I'm arrogant and I'm self-conscious, but it's like the worst part about being on tour for me is like being around people. The best part is eating. I was thinking about that the other day. Like when you go to a place and you don't have a gig and people take you to some place, you're like, oh, this place serves the best, insert food item here. And then you could just chill and hang out and eat. I mean, that's all. When I think about traveling, since this whole thing has been down, I only think about food. Like I never think about the shows. I just think about you too.
The snacks.
Pretty much. There were
My God.
The first few tours I did, I set up like lessons and master classes before all the shows because that's what I saw people did, and it made sense because then I come home and I've lost less money. And then I did it a few times. And then the days where I would have like one student and I'd cancel on them because I didn't want to do it, but actually the real reason is because we couldn't get into the venue on time.
Right.
And I'd go just go have dinner, and I was like, oh, this is the best. And
it's
then
the best.
I kind of don't do it anymore because that extra hour or two to go have dinner is like
I feel
easily the
way.
best part of the day. I mean,
however, sorry, I interrupting as I do. I apologize. Going to do it anyway. Excuse me. Is I think that it's I oftentimes like specifically during this period recognize that although I have a certain degree of social anxiety and you know I function best on my own, I love what I do so much, and I can't do it without the help of the people who participate in this, right? Like they facilitate this in every possible way. So there's a certain amount of personal growth that comes from having to sort of confront that, for me at least, where I'm on the road and you've got these meet and greets and you've got these things that maybe on my front I'm thinking, oh, you know, I'd rather go have a bath or whatever. But I find that there's some people that it really means a lot to, and I think, well, these are the same people that allow me to fart around and make these dumb records. So whatever I can do is I'm happy to, but fuck, man, it's exhausting sometimes. There's, you know, for every hour of social activity, it's like I need 2 of solitude. You know what I mean? Like some people really feed off of it. They're like, oh, I can't wait to go to a party after the gig. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Really? You're going to go to a party after the gig? Yeah, dude, it's at the rock club. It's at fucking Rock City.
Because you're an introvert, because introverts recharge on their own. And I think, but I just want to say one thing. I think the people who like both of your music are some of the greatest fans. They're just really great people. Like, especially on the interviews we've done, Devin, like the comments people write are just blow me away. They're just these incredible nuance. They write proper paragraphs. They use grammar and spelling. They have these complex ideas. And I'm just like, God, I'm glad you exist. I'm glad that you people out there exist. Like, I just want to say this to people out there watching and which will be fans of you both. I think you're a really great bunch. I just want to say that. It's like, I think, however all these introverts can deal with you, I just think I just get really moved by the kind of people that are drawn to this kind of stuff, because I do think who you are as artist inside, there is some sort of resonance with the kind of people who listen to the music. I think there is something very, very deep that goes somewhere very, very deep. What do you think?
Really nice of you to say. That's really, I mean, that's amazing to hear. But I'm sure Plini and I've got a mutual friend that has been working, I've been working with him for years. And it's like the people whom I have good relationships with are all really good people, you know. And it's like the relationships that I've got that are personal, I mean, they've all been in my life for many years, and they're also the same people that will tell you when you're full of shit. And I think that helps too, right? And I think that as the career changes and morphs and grows, I recognize there's a lot of people that change and morph and grow with this as well. And maybe they've become professionals in a field that, you know, in life, this is what we offer, you know, this is what our skill set can provide. We can do music. But I think in order to maintain an audience that has a degree of sensitivity to these things, you've also got to keep yourself in check, right? Like, I think it's really easy to buy into your own trip in a lot of ways. So I think being surrounded by friends that aren't necessarily in music, not necessarily in the industry, but people that you're just like, oh, that's a really good person. I rely on this person to tell me the truth. I rely on this person to, in a zombie apocalypse, I'd rather have them in my life than the guy here who has got sunglasses on in the middle of the night at Rock City who's claiming that he can't even tune his own guitar. I heard that the other day, some dude, I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? He's like, dude, I don't even know how to tune my own guitar. And I'm like, and you're a fucking guitar player? Like, really? Then you're an idiot. You know what I mean?
You're gonna be in
like,
trouble. You're gonna be in trouble. Like, what about if all the people who can tune guitars disappear? What are you gonna do? You have no role.
Well, this is how I feel. This is how I feel about this whole pandemic, in a sense, is there's, and I don't think it's entirely people's fault as well, but I think there was a certain generation of artists or actors or whatever that were sort of told that they're above other people. And as a result of that, now they're just like, well, who's going to change my diaper and tune my guitar? And everybody else is like, dude, you're fucking on your own, man. Like, I gotta take care of my grandma.
On that note, because like I don't think I haven't heard you talk about it and stuff, but obviously when you're a teenager, you got recruited into a much bigger crazy thing, right? By a big crazy dude, Steve Vai. Steve Vai, yeah. What the hell was that like? I mean, he's like a caricature of a person. You know, I really have no place to make a commentary on him as a person, but like, what the hell was that like?
Steve's one of my best friends now.
Awesome.
It's just, but it took us both a long time to work through it, because I was a shitty kid, and he was a rock star at the time, right? And he came out of that era where you could rationalize that type of thing. So I don't necessarily, I mean, when I met him, he was like maybe 30 some odd years old, and he had millions of dollars, and he had all this, and, you know, he was the best guitar player and all these sorts of things. And I was 19, and I really wanted to play music that sound like Godflesh or Napalm Death or something. And but my identity was so young that I used that difference to sort of rebel, I guess. And, you know, I made his life really difficult. And you know, and it took us a long time to sort of come to terms with the fact that we were both kind of full of shit. And I think that those are the type of relationships that I think are sort of, I mean, whether or not you believe in this sort of thing, I think you kind of attract each other. If you've got certain things that you're looking for in your music or in your life, it's like, there's something I need to learn, and this guy maybe has something to teach me, and I'm gravitating towards that just subconsciously, and maybe him as well. But it was difficult at the time, but it wasn't easy for him either, right? But I mean, I talked to him yesterday. It's like, it's a hard thing. There's been some people in my life that when I met, we were at odds with each other in a very similar way that maybe Steve and I were in the beginning, that now I just, I'm like, fuck that guy. I got no use for that guy at all, or girl or whatever, right? But with Steve, we both have just like grown together in so many ways that now it's like, oh, it's that guy. And it's funny because the same as like with Plini talking when he met me, it's like, oh, I've seen this guy in a magazine. It was the same thing with me and Steve. It was like, I was like, I can't be friends with this guy. He's not like a person. He's a caricature, like you say, right? It's like that face, that doesn't make any sense. You shouldn't be speaking, you know what I mean? You shouldn't be like using the toilet. I mean, what the fuck's wrong?
You just made
But
of
then
guitar.
after a while, what's this?
You just made of guitar.
Yeah, you just made a guitar. You're
Yeah.
like that. But then after a while, it's like, you know, I'd be suspicious of anybody who claims they've got it figured out, right? So, it was difficult, but I was a kid, and I was a little shit too. I was a fucking terrible kid.
Dude, I have a feeling we were very similar, obnoxious teenagers, like 100%, like just trouble, just like
I was a
optimistic.
nightmare.
Yeah, like just, and did you do, like, I guess I was talking to my partner about this today, about how we find the people in our lives who give us the evolution we need. And it's sometimes it's incredibly uncomfortable. And sometimes it's like, oh my God, like, and you look away and it's not, and exactly like you say, sometimes you grow together and you kind of respect the new arms and ears and wings you've grown from each other. Were there catalyst points?
With Steve and I?
Yeah,
or just in
I'm
general?
just interested. Yeah, because I feel like that's a kind of a significant chapter in your whole story.
No, very much. But I mean, without getting too personal in it, because of course these things are very personal. No, not at all. But I'm just because I would love to be able to say, oh, it's this, and this. But I also, because he's my friend too, right? Like, I think the catalyst for all these things, like you just said, is that's a very clear way of saying that. I think that you unconsciously gravitate towards those, and specifically when you listen to their music, it's clear what it is that their soul sings in a way. And I think through that you maybe subconsciously feel like there's something to learn there. But also conversely, I've learned more about myself from my interactions with some of the worst people that I've ever met, like some of the most toxic, violent people that have, caused me like profound trauma, were exactly what I needed, just for me to recognize. I'm like, oh, you're not that. Like, maybe, when I was younger, it's like, strapping and all this stuff. I was like, oh, I'm a badass, I'm a tough guy. And I'm fucking not. And it was through those interactions with people who are legitimately like that, where I was like, oh, actually, I'm just so afraid of this. And I was never able to articulate anger when I was a kid, because it was, for a number of reasons in our family, it was like anger was taboo. But because I was passionate, and because I had, a series of events when I was younger that was really confusing, I never learned how to articulate it. And so, like Plini was saying about how the music becomes a loophole for that. And it took getting out there and portraying myself as being that, and then drawing that to me, and then having people come into my life, and I'm like, holy fuck, I'm not qualified for this, And it was through those moments that I was able to say, you're full of shit. You were full of shit. And maybe that's the wrong term. I got a buddy that keeps bagging on me for saying, quit saying you're full of shit.
Well,
it's self-deprecating.
You're not.
I just don't know if it's what it means to me. I don't know if that's the right way for me to express it, but for lack of a better way to do it. But it was through those moments that I was like, okay, well, maybe it's much easier for me to present myself as I am than having this front that is a lot of effort to maintain, right?
You can be full of primordial ooze. That's more, because then that can transmogrify into anything. All right. So you're full of primordial ooze. And we are all,
my sex tape.
We're all full. Yeah. Lower the tone, but we're all full of this. Like, we're all full of something, and I think that's really interesting. To learn that much from being around
traumatized.
From what you project out, and because that's all we get. Like, it's all a mirror and it's a bounce and stuff. Well, on that note, what have you learned from Devin, Plini? Like, further down a path. I'd be really interested, because I think you are a really good lesson in evolution, like musical evolution, and people coming with you. I mean, isn't it nuts as well that you can go from like being strapping young lad dude, and then come through to like being like making a thing about an island, and like where Muppets could live, and like having a Muppet. Do you know how nuts that is? Like, I'm always bringing up the Muppets, but like, and people have come with you the whole way. like the whole fucking way. They're like, yeah, I'm up for this. Like, anyway, sorry, I could let you answer the question. I'm just rambling now. I'll be quiet now. Yeah.
Well, it makes me wonder if I've missed out on something by my lack of trauma.
There's still time,
because
brother.
There's still time. You're young, man.
guess
Like, you're young.
I suppose that's probably the answer. Like when I was in high school, all my report cards and shit would say like Plini is a mature student. And like that's the most boring. That's not like
You're
no one wants to
amazing.
listen to the music
an
of that
anomaly.
guy. It's
You're
just
an
nice.
anomaly.
He is an
and then-
anomaly.
and
It's
then
I love it.
everything's
fascinating.
fine.
Yeah, I think it's awesome.
It's fascinating.
Is that maybe the only reason it works is because it's uniquely boring?
No,
I don't think it's
no,
boring.
it's so pure.
Not at all.
You can hear it. It's
I agree.
like I honestly cut off. Like I was listening to Impulse Voices, and I said to you the other day, I'm like, I couldn't feel sadness until I got to that Perfume song, and then I was like kind of sad. I was like, well, there's some other character here. It's not you. There's some other person that's infected this song. I don't know who it is, but it's not you. And I was like, oh, I can feel sad again. I was like, I thought this would be a whole clean run. That the whole thing I'd be able to not feel sadness, but I'm like, that's a pretty good chunk. Where I'm like, nope, can't feel sadness. And I'm like, if you can do that for people, we need that, dog. Like,
I agree with that.
Yeah, stay pure. Like that's
I like to think that maybe in the song it's just like, oh, I just didn't like the smell of this perfume.
I think there's
It's
a dark
like,
person. I think there's a
made me
dark
a little-
person. I don't know if it's true, but
I don't know, man.
yeah.
Have you read I think there's a movie as well, but have you read the book Perfume? It's about a guy that has an amazing sense of smell and kills girls. I just found one chord that was like a little sadder and then used it. It's like,
I love the
think it's-
dichotomy of this. I really do. I think it's really beautiful. Like,
Same.
yeah, like
I think it's interesting because when I tend to be attracted to dark things, but not in the same way as I used to, because I understand my relationship with it now. In order for me to remain psychologically balanced, I find that a little bit of it tends to creep back into whatever I do. But I also recognize with that my tendency to use it as a way to feel self-pity in a strange, like really primordial way. It's like, I think that ever since I was a kid, there's been a lack of self-esteem that has sort of underlined a lot of what I've done. And I think that's also affected my productivity and my, when I was younger, definitely my need for attention and all these sorts of things was a sense of like a lack of self-worth. And although I've done a lot of work to counteract that and have made significant progress, I do still feel an affinity for things that are unhealthy for me on some psychological level, because it's like a way to sort of engage in that sort of very primordial sense of like, well, I'm not worthy. I'm not, it's like, it's not even imposter syndrome. It's like, it's taken a lot for me to accept that people like love me, even, with the family and all these things, because it's become such a pattern since a very young age, those real fundamental experiences that twist you. It's been then, it's like I take solace in that darkness but now it's changed in a lot of ways because there's an awareness that that's going on. And I think once that mechanism has a light shone on it, it makes it much more difficult to engage in authentically, because you're just like, I know what you're doing here. This is part of the pattern, right? It's the ego. Yeah.
And the ego is very small, and the ego is always threatened, and the ego thinks there's no one else that exists. It's only it. So we're not connected to a beautiful big fabric. We're alone.
Precisely.
We have to protect ourselves, and we're fucking
Precisely.
garbage, and we must inflate ourselves at every opportunity. And I think there is nothing more universally human, especially at this point in history. And I think things like social media and a lot of the way we live now has exacerbated this separation. And I would like to ask you both how do you cultivate self-esteem and how do you make peace with, because if there's, I don't know whether I can give people out there an answer or whether you have an answer to give, but I don't know, is there anything that yeah, I don't want to turn this into a self-help thing, but I'm like,
No, go.
is
Plini,
there
you first, man.
is there anything you do that you kind of that helps you feel connected and, you know, kind of cope with, look at the ego in the face and, you know, you get the vibe. I'm tired.
I try to figure out what's actually making me happy. Like, and there's a lot of things that are very shallow that could make me happy that don't necessarily, like popularity and social media and income and stuff like that. And then I suppose this is something that I've done more in my like last year or so, is when I was actually making music and would do something that seemed new or exciting. I was like, holy shit, this was the exact same feeling I had when I was like 15 and doing this in a school holiday. And like, so that's the thing that I need to do more of in order to feel good all the time. And part of that is like spending 10 hours making music that sucks, but that's still like part of the process of getting to that bit that feels good. And then to the point where when I release the music, I mean, I've got the bits that I like the most, and they're not necessarily the most popular songs, and the ones that people like are the ones that I thought like, that's kind of just, it's all right, it's just there. And that doesn't really even bother me. Like the reception of this album wasn't nearly as much of a contribution to me feeling good as just the process of making it. So I think trying to figure out stuff like that is a big part of probably why I'm like range from neutral to slightly happy.
You are living the promised dream, my friend. The promised dream. Like, I just want to say on that note, Maynard, James Keenan actually said the exact same thing. He's like, look, like the attention and the shows and all that stuff's really great and stuff, but what I love is like the making part. Like, that's the part I can't live without. That's the part of like being in the lab and making this. That's the stuff that I would, you know, I would wither away without. And I think it's interesting that this feels like a very universal thing. I'm talking about two people, but still.
Yeah. And I say that, but at the same time, I wonder how I would feel if, because like as a career, I've had pretty much a great time the entire time. And so I wonder if that was different, if I would genuinely feel like, oh, it doesn't matter that you all fucking hate what I do because I get to make music. I wonder if it would affect me, because it's kind of hard to know. Because if I do look at social media or whatever, it's a whole bunch of people telling me that I'm amazing, which definitely doesn't hurt as much as I like to think that it's not sort of something that I need. So it's kind of hard to have a true perspective of that.
And people don't talk about that enough. There is actual great sections of the internet and artists and people who just mainly get good positive feedback. Like, we don't, it really does exist. And you're an example. Like, people, if they, you know, like you, like, and I think it's about the, you know about you if you like you. Like, the certain people who get to a certain level. I think Louis C.K. said it once. He's like, once you get to a point where you're foisted in front of people, okay, that's about, let's forget that I used his name, just discount everything about him. But once you get to a point where people know about you that don't like you, it becomes a problem. Then people will hate you just because they know about you and they didn't choose to, whereas it's a bit different. How about you, Devin? Like, how do you find self-esteem, and what is your experience of that side of things as well? Because you've had like a lot of different chapters in your career, and it's a lot more time on the clock as well. Yeah.
Yeah. My reasons for doing music now are much different than they were when I started. When I started, I think the lack of self-esteem that I was talking about earlier propelled that I wanted to portray myself as, you know, more than I was, or what have you. And I have had a lot of different lives, I guess you want to look at it that way, professionally, be it Steve or Wild Hearts or strapping or DTP or anything, right? But as I said a minute ago, when I started to recognize the mechanisms that were at play with my creativity and the reason why I had pursued it as fervently as I did, it became much more difficult to accept those reasons. However, at this age, I also find that this, you know, I have a family, and there's practical ways, and this is, I mean, this is what my qualifications allow me to do. I mean, it's like, this is what I do. But now that I view it differently, now that I see those things happening, I tend to view music as the exhaust of a process. And that process is, in this lifetime, I'm trying to, for lack of a better term, actualize myself. And by that, I mean, who am I at the root of it? Not the projection, you know, not the Devin part of it, not the professional part of it, not the guitar player part of it or the singer part of it. It's like, who am I at the root of it? And I've always enjoyed esoteric sort of things. And when I was younger, of course, you know, drugs and things like this. But I got into meditation maybe about 5 years ago. And I find that that has been the hardest thing for me to do, because I think we have this impression of who we're going to find at the end of the rainbow there. And then when you have a direct experience with it, I find that my ego has gotten so threatened by that, so threatened by the fact that at the root, there's no separation between me or you or anybody. It's like, it's all, there's the essence of what it means to be a part of this, and to participate in that means that all the things that you've defined yourself as up to this point have no place in that. It's like a distraction. And truthfully, I'm not, at least at this stage, evolved enough or confident enough to sit with that and not feel irritation or panic or fear or any number of things that your ego's like, fuck that, man. You know, you're a guitar player, you've got a career. It's like, you are this, it's, you know. But the more that I find that I recognize that that's the only way out in a lot of ways, is to invest that time in the silence and be present with your true nature, which is the same as everybody's. There's a real humility that needs to be with that I don't possess currently. You know, it's like the role that I've chosen and you know, family and career and all these things, all of it flies in the face of that. And so a lot of times I struggle with this, like, the only way I can really go there is to just fucking trash everything and just leave and do that. But it's not what these aren't the choices that I've made. You know, the choices that I've made is to be a musician or a husband or a friend or a father. And I guess that the curriculum that I have signed up for require me to learn through all that shit. So the negativity and all the stumbles and all the failures that I have brought upon myself or participated in, and all the good things and all the successes and all that, are where the music comes from now. So it's not that there's like a directive now. It's not like the music is based on, oh, I'm trying to represent this or that or the other thing. It's just like, well, on my way to trying to find a peace of mind, like a true peace of mind, not a, oh man, I'm together. I'm like, cause I'm not, you know, I'm not, I don't know fucking anybody that is. So it's like,
Definitely not.
but in order to participate in that, it requires a constant sense of like reevaluating myself and constantly standing back up after a perceived sense of failure. And the reason that I have gleaned from that now, and I can say this, is the true nature of music for me is that of gratitude. And in order to represent music in a purely, like, if you're going to honor the idea of music, you got to try and remove yourself from that as much as possible. And so throughout my career, maybe 1 to 2% of the time I've managed to do that, where I'm like, oh, you weren't there for that. You were present with it without trying to hold on to it, without trying to quantify it or to claim it or whatever. But, because of my insecurity as well, there's a certain part of me that just, when those moments come, I'm like, oh, that, oh yeah, that, all right, we'll put a fucking package on it. We'll make a metaphor out of it. And you do all this stuff. And then by doing that, it's like, you're kind of back to square one again. But I have also resolved, now that I'm careening towards 50 years old, that it's like, well, that's your process. And it's okay. It's like, I think it's only not okay if you're making assumptions on your personal, psychological, spiritual growth being more than it is. I'm aware of where I am, and I'm grateful for the lessons, and I'm grateful for the failure, and I'm grateful for the pain in a lot of ways, because without that, I don't think I would have ever progressed. I think I would have just hung on to that sense of like who I thought I was, and then just die, right? So that's how I tend to sort of hold on to the gratitude, is by constantly trying to remind myself that there's tons to be grateful for. In fact, you have a body. It's like, here I am rambling again, but it's like
mobility, human mobility.
Yeah,
my best friend is dealing with that. We have no idea how incredible it is to be able to walk around, man. Like, it's no joke. It's not a joke, and it's not something you realize until it's, like, it's real. And I just want to say, I think that's a really profound thing to talk about, the relationship between the superconscious mind and being invisible, and your experience and the things you've been through that your ego is a part of, that your ego is a passenger in, as is the superconscious mind. They're both passengers. But I just want to say that I think that our ego isn't worthless, and the stuff that you make in those places, I think, has a lot of value. And like, I'm no expert on this or anything. Like, I'm not.
That's a good point, though.
I'm not as far ahead as where you are or anything. But
I don't know, man.
But we're all on the fucking path, right? But right. Like, just that whole relationship is the whole essence of humanity. That's our struggle, and that's our thing. And I think art is one of the most beautiful contributions you can make. And I think sometimes artists feel like they're being selfish, or they're being indulgent, or they're being some sort of a thing. And it might be easy to forget the thousands of experiences you're facilitating. That all these other people have had this experience with your end product, and maybe you do think about it all the time. I don't know. But the
gratitude is that we're able to do that. I think that removing yourself from the creative process in terms of being, Carl Jung, the idea of the collective unconscious, I think music exists without us, and our function is like actualizing it more so than being the creators, right?
You're just the way it comes to life.
Through your trip, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got your own identity through it, right? I just cut, like, in the time we had there, I just cut it like an 8-second long fart. It was like fucking really, really good.
So it gave you the space. Like, maybe that was like meant to be. Like, that was the collective unconscious needed to like fart. Maybe you had such a big idea that it had like an exhaust. And maybe it's maybe that's a metaphor. You said music is exhaust. So maybe that is exhaust. Because that is like methane. Holy shit. There we go. I clearly did too much acid as a child. Anyway, carry on, Plini. You have a question.
I was going to say, I think that makes sense to me, because I think the times that I write the music that I'm most excited about, I feel like I'm just hanging out and then like get to grab it out of music rather than trying to force it into existence so people can like it. And my question for you was, this process that you've done with what you're working on at the moment, which seems like quite different to how you would typically work, is that related to stuff you've realized, or just correlated to having more free time, or both?
It's both, but it's directly correlated to it. And I think that exactly like you just said. And again, I got a same buddy who, one of my best friends ever, he's the one that's always saying, you can't say you're full of shit. We've had this argument on several occasions where I say, listen, I don't think musicians are responsible for music. I think you just pull it out of the ether, and then through your experiences, you're able to interpret an experience with something true in a way that you can represent to others. And if they get something out of it that is moving to them, what they're getting is your interpretation of something that's beyond you, right? And I think that, like Christina was saying a second ago, that, you know, the ego serves a certain purpose in that, I forget how you phrased it, but it was really lovely. But I also feel that my view on art I've struggled for a long time thinking that art is an aberration, and that on some level, the role of an artist is to run out of things to say, because the idea of just always feeling the need to write and create and portray that and represent it, it's like, I don't know, it just seems like I struggle with the fact that maybe that's just like another trip that I'm on, right? But again, I had another friend that was just like, no, art is the only thing that it's because if it's coming from a place of gratitude, if it's like, I'm so thankful for mobility and my friends and my family and the ups and the downs in life, and here is my representation of that gratitude, then that makes sense, right? But this new thing is just, in absence of having to tour and having to be in a band and, you know, and all this shit, I've come to the point where I'm like, oh, that's actually what I want to do. You know, it's like, left to my own devices, when no one is saying, oh, I really like this song, or I really like this thing, or you should yell more, or tell me to fuck off, or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm like, when I'm left to my own devices, I'm like, oh, I just want to make floaty, weird, abstract shit, you know?
Do you think that do you think you're sort of figuring out what to, I don't want to call you a prog metal composer, but do you think you're figuring out like how to take being a prog metal composer to where a like great jazz improviser goes?
I don't know, brother. I mean,
sorry.
Yeah, dooba. I appreciate that. I mean, that's a really nice thing to even have insinuated, but maybe it's a self-esteem thing again, but I'm just literally following it where it leads, and I function really well on autopilot. And my hope is that I can be, that I don't participate with all the self-destructive shit that I tend to like gravitate towards, because by being on autopilot, when you're cluttered with your self-destruction, what comes out is really fucked up and really toxic, right? And not all the time, but the less, again, of me that I can do it, then the more clear I can be with it. And improvisation is, I mean, it's so important because it requires like a willingness to accept failure, I guess. And I've got some friends that are just, they refuse to improvise because I think they're afraid of fucking up. They're afraid of looking ridiculous. So I'm just like, hey, let's jam. And they're like, no, dude, I don't know what to do. Really? No, yeah. I've heard you improvise, man.
No, but like send me the chords 2 days in advance so I can work out something to improvise that sounds good.
That's not an improvise.
Well, but then again, man, it's like, where you are at 28, you say 28, right? Like when I was 28, it was Infinity was the record. And I was just on the very beginning stages of learning how to fuck up effectively. You know what I mean? So it's like, I didn't start improvising at all until my mid 30s, I guess. I was just so afraid of looking foolish or your vocals, and you tune them, and you just you're trying to make yourself appear like you're infallible. But there's something so liberating about just being like, no, that's what I look like, that's what I sound like. And this project now, I mean, I'm really fortunate lately, because it was a leap of faith to leave the whole Devin Townsend Project. And I mean, I love those guys. They were really good people, and we had a lot of fun. But also, by taking that leap of faith, I've ended up with a whole group of new people that I don't feel like. You've ever been with people, of course you have, where you're talking, and just by being you're watching everybody in the room looking at you like you're wearing their sweater. You know what I mean? They're all just like, oh, fuck, I guess I understand what you're talking about there, fucking crazy pants. But then now and then,
Yeah,
you'll find yourself with a group of people, and you're just like, you're speaking, and they're looking at you and like, oh, no, I get it. And I'm like, oh, fuck, man. Thank God. And now I find that I'm surrounded by these musicians that I can be exactly who I am. And it's like, I don't have to rationalize it. I don't have to pretend like I'm heavy. I don't have to pretend like, what I'm saying is like some sort of indicator of mental illness. It's just like, and by having those group of people, like there's like on this thing that I'm working on now. So dude, it's been so much fun, because I'll make this crazy abstract form and then send it to people, and then they do whatever the fuck they want. They send it back to me, and then I integrate it, and then I write to it, and then I send it back again, and then 24 people send it back, and then every time it's like a slow motion jam. And it's like, and there's really something to be said for when people are saying, well, what do you want me to play on it? And I'm just thinking to myself, well, we understand each other. I think you're brilliant. I think you're a kind-hearted person. If you hear something on it, I don't think for a minute that the reason you're putting it on there is because you want to get your licks in. You're like, every now and then you do play with a drummer, and it's just like, why the fuck is that fill in there? You know what I mean? It's like, it's a 4 on the floor thing, and all of a sudden there's ice bells and shit. And you're just like, all the function of that fill is like, look at me, right? And it's like, but when all of a sudden it's like, a bass player or a guitar player or a drummer or a saxophone player, you hear something, you're like, dude, the reason you did that is because it fits. And that's fucking great. And I love not having to discuss it. I love not having to like wield it with an iron fist. And maybe there's a certain amount of improv or jazz that goes along with that. But like I said earlier, man, it's like, I struggle with life. Like, I think probably all of us do. Maybe not you, buddy, but
yeah, you're fine, bro. Like you're
fine, bro.
You got it.
You're good. But I struggle with it. So to a certain extent, I don't think about the music, and I don't think about why I do it. And all I hope is that my intentions are pure enough that what comes out of me isn't going to fuck with my life, as it has in the past. I remember doing Alien, just being like completely fucked, and thinking, oh, I'm just going to follow this to where it wants to go. And at the end of it, I was like, oh, shit. Like, fuck, now this is my life for the next 2 years. This fucking sucks, right? But the intention of that was the same as what it is now. It just didn't have that sort of breadth of experience that allowed me to say, hey, you might want to think about that particular activity before you go on autopilot, right? Because I think it's super related. And clearly, I'm not a pure musician, because what's coming out of me is still fucked up. You know what I mean? It's like all sorts of weird.
Does that
But
make
hey,
you
that's
a
where
pure musician? I'm pretty sure that makes you a pure musician. Like, I think that actual defining thing, all the weird shit coming out. Sorry, bro, but that is also makes you a pure musician. Sorry.
Well, I appreciate it, but that's fine. I mean, again, my goal is to be, honestly, it's like I'd rather be known as like a good dad or something, rather. Like, the whole musician thing is like, I don't know, man.
Well,
I don't know.
okay.
I love it though. I love music. I think it's so crazy. It's like vibrations, right? I love that. It's like forms.
It's super nuts. And I have a question for you, Plini, about collaboration, but I just have to ask one thing on behalf of everyone. Who are the people you're making the music with? I have to ask, like, it's just, there'll be curiosity.
Oh, there's so many people. So many people.
Can you pick your top 3?
Like that I'm working with now?
Yeah. Yeah, these magical people who you don't have to wear their sweater and they know they get you and stuff. You don't have to give me the whole list.
No, I mean, it's a lot of people. I find that like now that I had made that step to sort of step away from the role that I had started to portray myself with, you gravitate towards people. And a lot of it is the band, like the last tour I did, the Order of Magnitude thing, it was 10 people on stage and they're all involved. So there's 10 of them, you know what I mean? And but there's another couple of dozen and they're
Wow.
a
So
lot of
that
them are
many.
musicians.
So that
Oh,
many.
yeah.
You're like,
Yeah, but
you're actually dealing with like 30 people.
yeah, but a lot of them aren't musicians either. They're just like friends. But I know that they're cool, right? And I know that they've got, you know,
Like ideas?
and so pardon me?
Like ideas? Like they bring ideas?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. I sent it to them too. I'm like, do whatever you want to it. Send it back to me, right? Somebody put coconuts on a part, like clip clop sounds, and I was like, fucking. But because he's a good dude, I'm like, of course it makes sense. Of course it makes sense. You know what I mean? Why? I would never think that this guy is like the type of dude that would like put ice bells in the middle of it, right? He's like, you know, of course, when I got the thing back from the guy's not a musician, he's not a professional musician, but when he put the part on it, he's like, dude, I heard clip clops there. And I was like, of course you did. That's fucking awesome, right? Like,
I love it.
So
The ice bell, is that called ice bells? I was guessing. Is that what they're
Yeah,
called?
you know,
Ice bells?
Yeah,
I've
ice
never
bells.
heard that word before. You like your coconuts clapping together works. Ice bells, that's just showy.
Well, it's
I
because
love
the
that.
intention.
Yeah. Oh,
The
yeah.
intention.
And
The
you can
intention.
bring that.
The guy's my buddy, and he's like, I like what you're doing, and I think it needs horseshoes, right? It's like, and that makes way more sense to me, right? Like,
I want to know Plini what your collaboration experiences are because you do have such a singular approach to making music, but you have kind of brought in people and stuff. What's your experience of bringing people in and like what they bring to it? And yeah.
I mean, they're all good people that are friends, and I was thinking this the other day, I'm not even sure whether they think much of the music I make. Like, I know they like it enough to play it, but I don't never get the sense that I'm like the employer at the top and they're working towards my vision. It's just like, these are my friends and we go make music, and it happens that like my name's on stuff and I make more money, but like that's
name.
Fortuitous. Fortuitous.
Exactly
Well,
the
we're
same.
all
Exactly the
friends.
same. Sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Depends on the tour, right?
Yeah. You get the minuses too. You get the pluses.
Oh yeah.
And the minuses.
Yeah. And that's not something that I would ever want to not have. Like, I would hate the idea of going on tour I just hire a musical director and they find me a band, and then we get to the first day and everyone's rehearsed, and then I get to know them like from there as a coincidence of trying to make music together. I think it's always, now everyone's a friend, like new people that I work with, people that I've met on tour or become friends with through friends and things like that. And then the collaborations where it's like a guest soloist or something like that is sort of a similar thing of just, hey, there's a space on my music and I like you and I'd like you to fill the space with whatever you want. And then I'm happy with it because I like you, like, and I'm glad that you contributed to it.
Precisely, man.
And I try, like, when I think of that, I'm not sure if it's where I live, but there's a lot of cafes with where old people hang out. And I like to think of my collaborations with them as just like two old people get together and see, like, what have you been up to the last 10 years, and then wander off.
I agree.
Instead of a coffee, it's a sax solo or whatever. But it's just like it's not, it's more of a coincidence of friends that are good at music than trying to make good music, if that makes sense.
So
Perfect sense. That was really well put, man.
That's the whole thing is human. It's not music. It's it's human, or it's the collective. What you were saying before about the not being separate thing. This is maybe an opportunity, and especially when you're scaling it to 30 people, you're actually kind of doing the superconscious mind in real time almost.
I just want to hang out with people whom I like. And it's like,
I'm just overcomplicating this shit.
No, I don't know. I mean, God, I do the same, but I think it's like, I think exactly what Plini just said. I think exactly like that. It's a consequence of people who enjoy each other's company. And I mean, the only thing is, I felt almost a little bit of shame when you were talking about you'd hate to be in a situation where you show up and there's people there and everything, because I find that the group of people that I would love to just continue working with, a lot of times I just can't afford to. You know, it's like this last thing that we did, it was so expensive, right? That at the end of it, I was like teary because I'm thinking, I can't do this. I can't continue this. Like, it was like 2 buses and a semi and like 10 people and like all the crew and the hotels and all this shit. And it's like, you know, you lose so much money. All the shows, like 90% of the shows were sold out. You would think that it would be fantastic, but we came out, dude, I came out of it with so much money in the hole that it was like heartbreaking, because I'm thinking all I want to do is that, really. So when it comes to this next year, you know, the people in my world that are responsible for keeping, you know, me and my family eating and clothed are like, you can't do that now. You gotta do something different. So all of a sudden I have to think, okay, well, who can I get? Who can I hire to play? And shit, do we have to go back to backing tracks? And you know what I mean? It's like, but ultimately I think that those concessions are also kind of part of it. And maybe even going back to one of the earlier points of the conversation, the fact that there was that, you know, juxtaposed by something else that isn't bad, it's just different, gives value to each, right? And I'm cool with it, but man, it's like, you know, even today I'm like sending out mails going, are you available, to a bunch of people, and you know, a lot of them who I've never played with before. And I'm thinking to myself, like, yeah. And there's all these festivals coming up next year, and they're just like, oh, we want you to play metal. And I'm sitting here fucking making a ambient record called Snuggles. You know what I'm saying? And they're going, oh, dude, you know, you got to get out there, man. You got to be brutal, man. We got the double kick and we got the flames. And I'm thinking, I'm sitting here with a fuzzy jacket. I've got this character for this Snuggles record that's supposed to be this like inner child. He's like this little beanbag thing. And I've been wearing like these fuzzy socks and pajamas for the past 6 months. And I'm like, there's a part of me, it's just like heartbreaking to think, fuck, I got to go back out and do that. And it's not like I dislike that music. It's not like I regret it or I'm like, hey man, I don't do that anymore. But I'm just kind of like, the whole process of evolution for me as an artist or as a musician is so fundamental to my sense of internal equilibrium, that the idea that money dictates that you got to fucking go back and do all this other shit, I'm just kind of like, and I'm sure once I'm out there, I'll be like, oh, that's cool. You know what I mean? Yeah, go fuck yourself or whatever, right? But there's a part of me that just
wear a battle jacket.
Maybe that's what it is, right?
You should wear a battle jacket and Reeboks and like acid wash jeans and go hard the thrash character and be a version of an 80s thrash guy. I'm just saying,
just a big DRI patch on the back. 100%. I think it's like, but it's got to be, they got to be brand new. Like it's like stiff battle jacket, right? Yeah. No, I don't know. It's like the financial side of things is just such a motherfucker, because my ideas and the vision that I have to do this is like, it's so grand, but my status as a performer, as an artist, is like lower mid tier. I've always said that, right? So it's like, so I'm like, you know, even with this puzzle record, it's like 2 records and 2 movies and the graphic novel and the book, and it's surround mix and everything. And I sent the budget in to everybody today, and they're like, how the fuck are you going to afford this? And I'm like, I don't know, you know. So I end up doing all this other shit, you know what I mean? Like just to try and bankroll this stuff. But you know, it's like but that's the juxtaposition that I think is important. I think you got to have one to recognize the value of the other. I mean, I do believe that. Either that or I'm just rationalizing it so I don't fucking get bummed out.
Did you have big ideas when you were first making music, or have the ideas grown with the ability to do them?
Both. But I remember even with the first, I had my first band, it was a 3-piece band, and we were called Gray Skies. When I remember showing up at the venue and they had written it as Grace Guys, which I thought was really good. But even then, I remember recording it and thinking, oh, I want this here to have like the orchestra stuff, and I want this to here have the choral stuff and whatever. So it was always kind of there, but the seed was there, but it certainly got watered by my experiences over the years, right? But ultimately, that's really what I want to do. And so every time I have an idea, and now they get more and more grand, I'm happy to push it. And there's a certain amount of invention that comes from necessity too, right? Like if you had all the money in the world, if you and I had, you know, Miley Cyrus money to have massive,
swap,
you know, that would be so fucking great.
Oh my God. Okay. So I want to
menace.
I want to swap the bank accounts of every musician in the world. We collectively go just swap them just overnight. That would be a great film. I would watch.
I'd be a menace.
That. It'd be great. It'd be absurd. Like,
well, even this idea that I'm working on now as a collection of songs, it's shit. It's not songs. It's just an idea, right? But it's like, but then when the idea comes, I'm just like, oh, that's what it has to be. Like, there's no question that it has to be that way. So I remember like 3 weeks ago, I was going, please don't get to the point where you feel you need to put a symphony on this. Because you can't. You'd
already lost. You'd lost when you
I'd already lost. So yesterday I had the conversation with the conductor and I just said, you know, and so I sent him all this shit. Dude, I said, man, you know, and here's this guy, dude. This guy, you know, he's telling me, he's like, oh, I work with Maroon 5 and Pink and Lord, and I've got all these platinum records. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got this stupid fucking thing, and I need it to be like this, right? So, you know, please don't throw me under the fucking bus when it comes to the rates, but I need it to be like this. And so as of today, he's just like, okay, I'm in. And then I talked to the choir yesterday too. And I talked to the conductor and she's like, well, what is your idea for this? I'm like, well, it's gonna be this, and I'll put it and blah, 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 it's this metaphor and all this shit. And she's in too. And the week before I had talked to the management and they were just like, don't do what you did with the last record, because with Empath, I fucking spent so much. And I was like, dude, this is nothing. This is an ambient record. It's not going to be that way. And then this morning I had to send the mail. I'm like, it's actually 2 records and it's in surround. It's got the movies and we need a graphic novel. And so the box set, I want it to be on the outside. It's going to be this one. And then it's going to have a combination lock. And then it's going to be a series of ads that you have to decode. And I've made this code thing that you're going to have to figure out. And then when you get into it, there's going to be this little beanbag character that's going to represent the inner child. There's going to be all these fucking stick men. They're going to represent. And it's like, you know, and so I sent them the mail this morning and I haven't heard back. So.
Oh man. Oh
yeah,
you didn't mean,
but I mean one day we're gonna be dead soon, so fuck it, right? Like
I do you know what's really, and you're not gonna, like, you're a humble person and stuff, but it makes me think of the Bowie exhibition that toured the year before he died. And he toured when he was sick and no one knew about it. He toured this exhibition so people would go and see it before it was like a big thing again. And the thing I walked away from it was, he took every idea he had to the furthest possible dimension it could go. Like every fucking idea, you look at these drawings and that thing, and the idea went the whole way. Like the idea went all the ways it could go. And it's like that right there awesome. Is like the idea going all the ways it can go. It probably could go more. Is it
selfish? Do you think that's selfish though?
No, it's awesome. It's like awesome. You're like, oh my God, you let it go. You held its hand all the way till it became a weird adult. Like a weird ass adult. Like you helped it grow. Like you got it out of the womb and like you fed it the whole way and it became a thing. And it's like, what a gift to the world. Like, you know, and the inner child, anything that connects us back to that. And okay, here's a Plini connection. He called his album Impulse Voices, and it's about like being, you go. Can I throw it to you? I don't want to describe
sure. It. I was just gonna say, I think it's not selfish unless you're like ruining the lives of people around you, which I assume you wouldn't get to that point.
Hopefully.
Like, sorry, honey, we live on the street, but look what we'll have.
I've been me and my wife been together for over 30 years, man. We've been through that fucking maybe 12 times. Maybe 12 times, man. I've been like, I know that we're having problems now, but check it out. I got to use a fucking real violin or whatever, right? Like,
what a cool woman. That's cool, man. I have mad respect for like that level of enjoyment.
oh, she's great. Either that or she's just completely broken. She's like, whatever, dude. You know what I mean?
Just go.
Just go, man.
Yeah, you got to go. We have kept you for an absurd amount of time.
I hear you. I mean, I also feel like it's sort of weird to even discuss it in any sort of altruistic terminology, because ultimately I'm just like, I feel compelled to do that. And if I'm not fooling myself and it is an expression of gratitude, then that's what is required. And therefore I have to figure out a way to do it, and I will. And fortunately, I'm at a point after doing it for as long as I have, that I can support my family and for the most part do these things, right? Like there's a certain amount of there's a lot of cross collateralization between one thing and another, right? It's like, you know, hey, you made a bunch of money doing this festival, you made a bunch of money doing this thing, but let's just talk about what happened last year. And then if you come up neutral, then I think we're okay, right? But I just, honestly, I just love it. I love it. It's like, I just love it. It's so fucking awesome. It's like, I just love actualizing these ideas. It's just, and you know what it's like, man, when they come into your head, you're like, that could be this. And the representation of that is, I mean, years ago, I did that silly Ziltoid thing. And I remember talking to the label, and they're like, well, what is it? And I was like, well, I need 10 grand, which was in the scheme of things was very little, to make this record. And he's like, what's it about? And I was like, what's this coffee drinking alien that's like, you know, it's blah, 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 blah. And then by the end of it, it turned into like this, you know, did these big shows. And then when it came time for the second record, I spent the entire budget making like 3 episodes that of like, dude, the puppet is so fucking cool. Like, it's on YouTube. It's like his eyes are moving, and we did all this thing. Mike St. Jean, dude, Mike St. Jean, a buddy of mine in Plini, he's gone through the ringer with this shit. I come up to him and I'm just like, dude, I got this idea. He's like, and then we got to have the moon in the background and all this shit. And Mike's like, okay.
Here we go again.
But I often wonder, because he's actually making the movie for Snuggles, right? Like
awesome.
Yeah. So I asked him to do it, and he's like, yeah, I'll do it. But I also often wonder if he's the same way, if he's just a wonderful creative human being, or if he's just broken, right? So maybe that's
I think
the
a
same.
bit of both.
Maybe that's all of us, right?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe everyone. That's
yeah, man.
It's joyous and we're broken. And yeah, who knows? Like,
who knows? Who knows? But who knows?
It's a nice.
But I love it. I love it, and it's brought great things into my world and great people, yourselves included. So onward, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember talking to a friend, you know, Paul Masvidal from Cynic.
Yeah, I love Paul. Yeah.
He was putting together an acoustic show and working out all these projections. So he was going to be sitting in this like constellation of stuff just for like a small one-off, I think.
Yeah.
And he was telling me about it, and I was like, oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. And then his response was like, yeah, but what else is there to do?
I agree with that. That's a great way to look at it. What a great way to look at it.
What else do you do? What do you do?
Well, buddy might said the other day too, he's like, man, you get so much done. And I'm just thinking, well, exactly, like, what else? What do humans do? Like, should we be watching TV or something? I mean, like,
well, I think the best thing that you guys have said is go make 10 hours of music that sucks. And I think that to all of the frustrated musicians out there who've been punching cones instead of making music today, go and make some terrible music. Go and make some music that sounds awful, like just awful. Just make some garbage. That's a better way to spend your time. Like, go out and make some garbage, just primordial ooze.
Yeah. Man, I wish punching cones had become a thing, like as a term in Canada. I love that. It's great.
I have not indulged in the practice in some time,
Well, smoking dope, right?
many years, but that
Right.
is that an Australian term? I guess it is.
I think so.
so, yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
That's from my youth. Yeah.
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 Punching cones.
Oh, yeah.
That's fucking
I forget
great.
that you're using like weird vernacular, and you're like, oh yeah, it's fine.
Well, Australia and Canada, we're both part of the Commonwealth, right? So we've got our own little trip back to the British heritage, but there's certain things in every culture that are indicative, and cones is one from Australia that I like, right? Ginch was one in Canada that I was surprised to find that no other cultures seem to use. You know what ginch? Underwear.
That's a great word.
Yeah, like I think gaunch is plural. Like, you know, like I got a gaunch pull. Like if someone comes up behind you and like hauls it up, it's like a gaunch pull.
Oh.
Wow, that
Or
is
like,
really obscure.
I gotta go wash my ginch.
Well, look, I like that this show's been educational. We learned some new words. I lowered the tone with our local terminology, and no, you did too. Really, none of us were. Yeah, underwear and weed is not.
Plini, you got one then?
It's not highfalutin.
Oh.
Yeah. Do you want to bring some like bad terminology to the table?
Or bring it back up even?
Yeah, can you bring it back up? We've lowered it. It's sad. It's a very sad place.
Nothing comes to mind. My bass player and drummer are from not from Newcastle, from the Central Coast, which is like, oh, okay. So yeah. I look to them and now you for these things.
Yeah, we have a colorful, it's a bogan beach town. It basically,
is it?
That's basically what you have to do growing up is smoking weed in exotic locations. That's pretty much what you do. We had two bands in our high school, side note. One of them was called Stifilus, which I maintain is one of the finest names for a high school metal band in the history of time, and
very good. Very good.
Anyway, we're going down a whole path now. I feel like we've explored. I do want to go back to the inner child thing. Just close that, because I did want you to say, because yeah, I'm sorry. I go off on tangents, but then I drag the boat back in. But yeah, Impulse Voices is your new album, and you named it for an interesting reason. And I want to close out with a question about inner children.
Yeah, I heard the phrase in a podcast about psychology, and then it doesn't seem to appear on Google much, but as far as I understand, impulse voices are like the voice that a child has, which tells them to do weird stuff like touch trees and like eat bugs. And then adults and society basically shout down your impulse voice to make you normal. And so it's kind of like this is the little thing that you need to keep alive and eat bugs. I thought that was a good album title.
I think that's a good ethos and like thing to leave this show with. I think that's, what would you say to your inner child if you could talk to them right now?
Something about a Ginch for sure.
How it stole Christmas.
Eat more bugs.
Man, I wish somewhere in the future there's a live Plini record just called Eat Bugs.
Yeah.
That would be great too.
Yeah.
Can you do that?
That'll be my big tiny stage production, and there'll be a very small corner of the stage, but a huge microscopic projection into a theater. Just bugs just fucking around.
I support you in that. And on that majestic note, I'd just like to thank you both for going on a deep dive. I think I like calling it The Void because I think that's the point. Let's get deep and be human, and it's always a pleasure like getting ridiculously deep about stuff, and I appreciate that a great deal. And I'm really glad that you guys came together because I think you're a really interesting human manifestation of that super conscious mind that makes music. So good.
Well, you too. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening or day, or like wherever you fit on the space-time continuum. Goodbye.
This is an experience of the void.